Hello, my name is Alex Kruzel, and I'm here to ask a question. My question today is, should we stay the course on sustainability? We're in a time where we've been on a trajectory of historic investments in renewable tech, in climate resilience, in corporate sustainability, and ESG. Yet at the same time, we're facing a new policy regime that says, look, do we really need to do these things? I put forward a book, The Courage to Continue, as a nonpartisan technocratic debate to get to the heart of this very question. When I stepped back at the time of President Trump's inauguration, I asked myself this question, actually. I said, well, what's at stake here? What really matters? Knowing that things would change, which is the right of any presidential administration. And I stepped back to say, well, actually, maybe in the world of corporate sustainability, we haven't been making the right ties. We made this collectively very emotional to extremely polarizing. And instead of thinking about how do we create space and time, an honest debate in the middle, and appeal to American sensibilities, we're not going to make progress on these historic investments, and for many of us, lifelong work in this area. So what I try to do is then offer a blueprint, a format. And, as I go through these different areas, just a little bit more about myself. I am an advisor to business, to government, and to nonprofits and academics. My career started globally, actually, in the Peace Corps. And I think that's where I learned this patriotic sense of our own national identity and the influence that we have globally. I then transitioned to management consulting in emerging markets with Deloitte, and answered questions of public supply chains, public sector finance, and then corporate global expansion. When I returned to the United States, I got heavily involved in the Chicago Council on Global Affairs, where I sit on the board and have a purview of geopolitics and national security agenda that many administrations have put forward. As President Trump steps into office, and it's been doing for the past 6 months, we see a shift of policy from a whole of government national climate agenda, which we see cross-functionally in the Biden administration, to that whole of government national security agenda under President Trump. And in this blueprint of these 10 pillars of why should a company, why should a country, why should a city, why should a university stay the course on sustainability, I'm saying 10 pillars of debate. And when I say why stay the course or not, I do mean it. I think we should put everything on the table and ask these questions quite plainly. Let's look to facts and data. Let's look to leading experts. Let's look to policymakers from both parties to say, what is really the give and take here? I start off with looking at questions of regulation to say, okay, even if we strip away the regulatory environment in the United States, which is changing, what about the rest of the world? And our best estimates are that anywhere from 600 to 2,400 pieces of regulation, standards, guidance documents are required for a corporation to stay compliant globally when it comes to ESG disclosures, climate risk and resilience, and other corporate sustainability matters. Regardless of maybe what the US policy regime looks like, many corporations will have to stay the course. Meanwhile, I also look at number 2, the question of stranded assets. Assets from a corporate director's perspective have a useful lifespan of 30, 40, 50, 70 years if you're a coal plant. And if you're thinking about investing in a coal plant today and looking to recoup your investment over a 70-year run, well, actually, what's the potential that that asset could be stranded due to not only policy changes, but bare bone economics? And that's the conversation we need to have, whether they're green assets that are related to the energy transition and renewable tech, or if they're brown assets too that are carbon intensive. Where do corporates and cities and states hold risk because of this potential stranding. Let's evaluate that and then answer the question, should we stay the course? A third element of this equation is the question of insurability, what the CEO of Aon is calling the crisis of confidence that we're having in our country. Why is that? Over the past 3 years, on the residential side, premiums have gone up by 30% as a national average. If you're in Texas, that's closer to 60 to 70. And if you're in coastal Florida, that's more like 90%. That's historic. And for an industrial high-tech economy, we do not know how to pave a way for growth without the question of underwriting and insurability. This is not just residential, it is on the commercial side as well. This is impacting where people live, where people work, and the value of their homes, and ultimately up to our country's economic health. On the climate litigation side, this goes hand in hand with the first question around regulation. Because of the new regimes of regulation and because of the intensifying climate shocks and damages, last year was over $112 billion in the United States of damages. And if you extrapolate that globally, you get to the trillions pretty quickly. And when we think about climate litigation, states, cities really have been main actors of this and have put forward lawsuits with the headlines, "Polluters will pay." And those with the massive historic emissions, typically energy companies, are the targets often for these lawsuits and say, look, you have to fund, if I'm New York, my super fund to repair broken infrastructure from rising sea levels, historic hurricanes that are caused by climate and the climate crisis. We're seeing also litigation around disclosures. What you are disclosing or not actually is another reason for climate litigation. This is also bolstered by climate attribution science, which provides a historic scientific baseline of what weather was and where the delta to where it is now, and that the impact that's having both on our economy and our national security. The fifth element, global supply chains. Boy, are we hearing a lot about this today, especially with the updated tariff and trade policy coming from the Trump administration. We can't forget, not only is there tariff and trade policy, but the underlying climate resilience and ability for global commerce to be transacted in ways that works well for our companies and for our countries. We can't ignore the fact that when the water level is low in the Rhine, cargo ships get stuck. And that's happened, and that's delayed commerce. When bridges, again, are inundated with flooding and also falter, these are issues in our global supply chains which are insecure. They are not resilient. In the United States, we have a rating of C- for our national infrastructure, and that hinders our economic performance. 2 or 3 months of the year, the single highway that connects the energy hub of Louisiana upwards north, the only way to go to transmit the oil and resources from that area, is flooded. And we forget about that link. The sixth element of this debate, why stay the course or not, I refer back to the question of critical minerals. And most importantly, critical minerals that reflect American values. We need to have access to these things. And this is actually where we're seeing a lot of bipartisan and nonpartisan cooperation. To say, look, we built supply chains over the past 50, 60 years that have been efficient, really from an economic perspective. We have not considered the ramifications of those being in all sorts of countries that might at one point challenge the U.S. in a number of ways. We're seeing that now. And so with a push for critical minerals for not only clean tech, but for high tech, for industrial companies, this is a big question. And ultimately, critical minerals come from the earth. And we've learned how to mine them effectively and not so. And we can't put our names on something that doesn't reflect American values around human rights, child labor, and other questions. Another hot topic today, number 7, AI. When we see AI, sure, there's a massive energy uptake that's required, the electricity demand and load that's necessary for advanced AI models and data centers. Sure, I hear that. However, on the flip side of that argument is a massive potential actually for energy savings. Google deploys its own advanced AI models to the question of how they balance their load and reduce the energy toll. And in 1 year, they actually reduced the energy intensity by 40%. AI can help better plan supply chains, reduce waste. It can help with digital twinning for decarb. A number of applications that we're seeing only in the past couple of years take off. And we should expect to see a whole lot more, which will make it easier, faster, and cheaper for corporates to stay the course on sustainability. Another big push, number 8, is employees. They are looking at their corporates. They are looking at policymakers. On the government side, they are professors in their institutions saying, look, we signed up for commitments to do things along the environmental, social, governance set of parameters. We have sustainability goals, things like energy reduction, decarbonization, waste management, water management, and I want to work for someone, an entity that shares the same values that I have. The younger generation, those under 40, anywhere from 40 to 80% of them expect their employers to do those things. And if they're not, and if they rescind, that will spell issues for those employers. Number 9, big businesses continue. And what do I mean by that? Even if in public, we're seeing debate and an anti-climate and anti-ESG backlash, anti-DEI, which for the purposes of this book is not necessarily scoped in. Yet in the backdrop, we are seeing companies like NVIDIA. When you compare their market cap to GDP, you're dealing with the size of an entity like the UK. I don't take that lightly. They are pushing forward. They realize we've made investments. We'll continue to make them. We need energy security for our operations. So we're going to go all in on decarb. We're a global business, so we understand the regulation, the question of stranded assets, insurability. We will continue. And there are many other companies that are doing the same, just a little bit more quietly. And this is one of the pieces of the feedback that I got early on when I was writing this book and interviewing different executives and policy leaders. What do you think? They said, Alex, yes, we'd like you to bring this forward, but I can't. I need you to do this, and I'm very happy to do so. Finally, the last one is American values. And this is my favorite. When I pulled back the layers, there's a long Republican, conservative tradition of environmental security, linking sustainability to, again, national security and economic prosperity. Theodore Roosevelt, with the forest management system, it was to commercialize the forest for the long term. President Hoover was to commercialize and protect our waterways. Richard Nixon, in bringing forward the EPA by executive order, he understood the commercial value of doing that and also the questions of security and competitive advantage to other countries that would give us for the long run. 92% of Americans, it's obvious, they want clean water, they want clean air. And also the same amount of Americans, they say, look, even if we didn't cause a problem, even if climate change is and the science is disputed, they believe Americans have the know-how and ingenuity to fix it. I was so enthused. Again, there's so much more in the middle that maybe we realize. And my punchline where I'd like to end is we are all now in the business of national security. It's a different time. The international relations, the geopolitics, the global conflict and tensions, they're undeniable. And the shakeup of trade and policy, yes, undeniable. Sustainability has a role and will play a role in the concept of environmental security. So I look to everyone. As I spur more of these discussions, I welcome the feedback. I welcome the opportunity to collaborate and discuss this further with all of you. And I look forward to hearing a lot more about it. So thank you for your time.